It's June 10th, 2013. The Nintendo Wii U has been out for half a year, and Sony's PlayStation 4 is waiting in the wings for a tense holiday release alongside Microsoft's next system. Microsoft themselves have been staving off rumors and reports of sketchy DRM around their console's software, which was later actually proven to be heavily considered. Regardless of the negative press, Microsoft begins their conference for their bemusing Xbox One home system. It starts with showcasing Metal Gear Solid 5 to get the crowd excited, then the final model revision for the Xbox 360, and a few end-of-era games for the system. They move on to the Xbox One, showcasing 7 games, then taking an extended period to explain the last game of the block. Now, aside from the developer they brought on stage seeming very uncomfortable and awkward, the showcase was a success, and the crowd cheers. It's a marquee title that aims to be a console seller and expand the Xbox's potential player base by allowing anyone to make their own game. They call it Project Spark. A rather appropriate name at the time that would lead to a little confusion, but we'll return to that later. So, although Microsoft's E3 2013 was rather basic overall, it did manage to get people excited for their new system exclusives, with standout titles such as Sunset Overdrive, Rise Son of Rome, and Project Spark. Project Spark soon entered beta for Windows 8.1 on December 3, 2013, via code entry. With servers swamped and forum threads beginning to fill with pouting gamers, reps for various media outlets ended up trying to assist through various measures, even as far as telling users to change their region language to Kazakhstan. These issues eventually eased, and by the Xbox One beta release on March 4th, Microsoft reported having over 250,000 users on the Windows 8.1 version. The Xbox One beta launch went a little more smoothly, with servers being more up to the task of newcomers. The only main difference at this point with each version was the Xbox One's ability to capture voice and physical motion via the Kinect sensor. Let's skip ahead to E3 to see how things are going overall. It's June 9th, 2014. Microsoft's release of the Xbox One in the past half year has been met with mixed reviews. A limited catalog of games that were met with average reviews, a confusing system UI, and relative glitchiness with some of the more extravagantly flaunted features like voice control and cable box functionality left consumers a bit underwhelmed from the start. Phil Spencer opens the Microsoft conference by announcing it would be only games, which actually turned out to be true. Microsoft showcased 38 games during their event, plus a DLC for Dead Rising 3, though an amount of the major games they announced would have issues, and some never released. Scalebound, Fable Legends, and a Phantom Dust remake were ultimately cancelled. Indie game Hellraid never saw the light of day. Meanwhile, other games suffered after release, such as Wolf, the Red Hood Diaries developers going bankrupt soon after launch. Online multiplayer shooter Evolve eventually shut down its dedicated servers. And although announced at the event, the game Grave never released on the system, with Grave VR on Steam seemingly having replaced it. But we're getting off topic with that. Let's get back to Project Spark. Spark was the 9th showcase of the day, with a flashy CG animated trailer showing some of the various things you can do in the game, and to much surprise, showing Rare's Conker to be a featured character for the title. Conker's reveal wasn't as positively clean-cut as Microsoft had probably hoped. Fans were divided as they were happy to see him again, but took issue with him as an IP stapled to a new IP to help influence sales. A trend Microsoft seems to have no moral for, though the game still had decent expectations from prospective players. It's launch day. On October 7, 2014, Project Spark came out of beta and officially underwent its full launch in the US. A physical starter pack edition was released to retail the same day at $39.99, which came with premium DLC and a 1-month Spark Premium membership. The digital edition of the game was free to play immediately. On the same day, a statement by the developers, Team Dakota, was put out to the press. They stated how during the beta phase, Project Spark amassed more than 1 million users, who created over 70,000 levels, and logged over 4 million hours in the game. So then, with such a positive result during the beta. What happened after launch? And what did the community think? The game itself sold decently well at retail. Not a major success, but not a destitute flop. At this point, the launch offered more content to the game through purchase, something a fair amount of users were not very keen on participating in. A large amount of the initial adopters of the program gained interest in it through the fact it was a technically advanced free tech demo of a soon-to-be-released game engine. Now in reality, it was a modifiable game in its own engine. An amount of users didn't realize they couldn't create, then sell their games within the engine on other platforms, thus isolating the tech enthusiasts as an outlier to the intention of the game. Now yes, you could create your own games within Project Spark, but they were to be shared with the community only. A common issue among players was the misunderstanding of the game's name itself. Many thought the name was a code name or a placeholder, when in fact it was the final name. Many people who played in the beta were surprised at the lack of a title change once it fully released. As the months went by after launch, interest in the game started to slow. Many were now eyeing the release of Conquer and the new game Conquer's Big Reunion, which were to be released within Spark in late April of 2015. Though the fact that this as well had to be purchased at $4.99 for the story, or $9.99 to gain access to the story assets as well, left many skeptical. Online communities would argue amongst themselves about Conquer's inclusion in the game, some defending Spark for bringing him in as an addition, with the expectations that more Microsoft series could be introduced as well to spice things up, to the opposite end of the argument viewing it as a cash-in to prey on the ravenous Rare fanbase. Regardless of opinion, things overall had been changing in the background around the game's press. It's no news to anyone who remembers Project Spark that after launch, information about the game starts to get foggy. There are a few reasons as to that. The vocal community for Project Spark started to die, and the game never received substantial influencer support on YouTube, Twitch, or social media. From the release of the Windows 8.1 beta to the official launch, the amount of fan forums and responses on media sites started to slow. Various established discussion boards about the game on the Xbox forums, NeoSeeker, and the official Project Spark community forums started to dwindle in activity by about summer of 2014, well before the October official release. It seems the game had an identity crisis as well amongst the users, with three main groups emerging. Those who were excited for an advanced game-building engine who were left disillusioned by the beta. Those who bought into the game with the expectations of new content for Conquer the Squirrel. And the normal folk who simply enjoyed or didn't enjoy the game. Microsoft had been keeping content and updates for the game consistent through the first couple months into 2015. And arguably the most important update and largest the game would receive would end up being Conquer's Big Reunion on April 23rd. It created a mini rehype of the game, with initial users enjoying the new assets from a series long dead, though a persistent annoyance lingered from a lack of a real original Conquer title. That following summer would prove to be rather quiet aside from the off-stability update. Late into the summer, it was announced that there would be one last major update to the game. Microsoft announced that the update slotted for October 5th would have the Premium Store assets free to download, ending the monetization of the title. Any purchases from late July to then would be refunded, and there would be no future content. And any physical copies registered from that point would also receive a refund. With a total of 46 released packs and 2,000 plus assets, we feel like we've gotten to a good place with our content offers for creators. This also means we will no longer create episodic adventures, including future Conquer's Big Reunion episodic content. We'll leave it up to you to continue his story in whatever ways you want, and we can't wait to see what you create. A year after the game had launched, they announced its conclusion. It was clear that this game would never be a success, so they preemptively decided to begin winding things down. Now keep in mind, this is not the end of the game. Yet. By this point, the active player base was maintained by enthusiasts, with the off layman joining the experience on occasion. With the announcement of an end of content, a large amount of the remaining Conquer fans departed, viewing the outcome as both a waste of time and money. The majority who stayed for the coming year mainly consisted of casuals and aspiring game makers. Now, I'll be blunt. After reviewing hundreds of videos of this game's creation functionality, it can be used impressively to make adventurous worlds with stories, as the majority of the marketing and press made it out to mainly before. But the majority of the content made wasn't, rivaling games of equal caliber and concept you'd see in Flash media games, or Unreal asset flips, where
you play as primitive cubes.
The player's ambitions aren't the real issue with the game, though. The limited toolsets and rather janky user interface to use the given assets were more of the issue. So, after future content dreams were dashed, where does that leave the game? Well, things stayed uneventful for a while. It coasted for another half year under Microsoft's watch. Team Dakota themselves continued to show off the game on Twitch for a while as well to a small audience. Then on May 13, 2016, Microsoft officially announced Project Spark would cease all development, and that the game would be pulled from digital distribution immediately. Online functionality and services for the title would be discontinued on August 12th. Team Dakota and Project Spark's Twitch and YouTube channels were abandoned, and Spark's social media accounts went silent. Team Dakota themselves dissolved, with most of the staff placed into newer projects. The Project Spark community forums were wiped sometime after these events, dismantling any hopes of remaining active fans to contribute to the game under Microsoft's roof. Mentions of the game became something of a passing comment, or a question of what it was. By 2021, the game has become mostly a memory in the vein of other brief online games, forgotten to the annals of gaming history as a footnote for the Xbox One. This similarity is what drew me to Spark, something that had great potential, but was quickly squandered. Now there is one last question about this game. What is its condition today? Well, I was curious, and before I started this research, I had never played the game. So I picked up a copy. And upon putting the disc in my Xbox One, it immediately started to update the game. The starter pack's DLC code bonuses were unavailable as expected, but through some digging I found the latest update for Spark to be in fall of 2020, for no discernible reason. When starting the game, you are given an introduction movie, after which it brings you to the main menu, giving you the option to use a tutorial, play games, or make a game. Selecting play on the main screen will bring you to another menu where you can choose to do three things. Jump onto the servers and play other people's creations, play a pre-made story by the devs, or play a semi-auto-crafted adventure. The game's servers are offline now, so that function only brings up an unable to connect prompt when selected. The other two options work, which frankly surprised me. Choosing Episodic Adventures brings you to the two stories the devs crafted: Champion's Quest Episode 1 Voidstorm, and Conker's Big Reunion Episode 1. Both are fully playable and have a gameplay time of around an hour. The final option here is Crossroads, where you can make decisions as to some parts of a pre-created quest, such as environments, locations, and bosses. The game constantly tries to request connection to the Spark servers whenever in main menus, something that remaining users would probably find annoying. Now, the other main option, Create, allows you to craft a world of your own design. Upon starting Create for the first time, a fully narrated walkthrough of learning the toolsets and coding language begins, not too different from a Photoshop walkthrough. Coding, spelled with a K, is the game's interaction language for anything from actions to passive functions. It's formatted as a visual and simple programming language. This ability is the core of Spark, and from my own usage, crafting and designing, it's easy to learn, but difficult to master. As a whole, the game is still fully usable as a personal game maker, or as an art device for creating scenes, but as it stands, the main draw of community and sharing games is long over. Throughout my time with Spark, I enjoyed spending hours warping the land and designing layouts of the scene I wanted, but when I actually played the game, it was bland. Pre-made game design choices restricted creation to shooters or open-world brawlers. And while the ability to roam freely in your world is nice, it can and will be marred by frame drops and lag. This is also very present in the story campaigns as well, with Voidstorm suffering worse lag, but Conquer having cutscene audio being mixed too low and is frequently cut off by dialogue transition. Overall, my experience hands-on with Project Spark was not wasted time in my opinion, but it's certainly not a full game anymore. And the part that is the game is underwhelming. Though the creation engine is impressive, especially for the time, even I was startled at how quickly and efficiently it operates, but with no way to download more content, and with Microsoft seemingly wiping away its memory, it's a fair assessment to see this game be consigned to clearance bins and dusty closets. Though Microsoft found important use of many of the developers after Spark's shutdown. Most of Team Dakota's lead members still work at Microsoft, in fact. Technical director Soren Hannibal is now an engineering manager for Microsoft's mixed reality program. Technical director Jason Major went on to assist Minecraft's development. Art director Brad Schuber is currently the lead art director for Minecraft Earth. Studio head and executive producer Michael Sachs-Person is now the COO of Mojang. Reaching out to creative director Henry Sturchy, he has stated he's left the gaming industry as of this publication, and lead designer Brad Reb did not respond to any inquiries of his current work. In the years after Project Spark, we've seen a few other attempts at a similar idea by some indie devs, but the only game of similar caliber has been Media Molecule's Dreams. Its success has been greater than Spark's, yet Sony has done little to promote its release, both through its beta in 2019 and its retail launch in early 2020, relying on word of mouth and a market focus on artists. Whether or not it stays afloat for years is hard to tell, but the game has both lasted longer than Spark's active development and has generally garnered only praise. In the end, Project Spark didn't last long. A mere blink of the eye, a footnote to many, and for the few that stood by, it did manage what it set out to do: ignite that spark of creativity. Thanks very much for watching, and have a good night.